Okay, and then when you become 13 and you confirm your Catholicness,
Right.
you take a saint's name to become
Okay.
a Christian. So
Okay.
I chose Sebastian.
All right.
And I always used it, and you know, a lot of people, I haven't. I just that's who I am, and
Okay.
so Father Sebsastiaan. I didn't want to be King Sebastian,
Right.
because when I got into the vampire culture, there was nobody.
Right.
There was like a couple newsines and a couple magical orders, but there was no community in person besides role-playing games. A wonderful game called Vampire the Masquerade.
Right.
And a lot of my friends went to me and they were like, "We like the whole vampire thing, but we're not role players. We're lifestylers."
Right.
And they were all independent, so I threw a vampire ball. And the only time back then people got together was at the Anne Rice Ball in New Orleans until 1995, and I threw a vampire ball.
And was that New Orleans too? Or where'd you,
I went to New Orleans for
where did you throw your first ball?
New York
Okay, New York.
at a club called the Bank.
Okay.
But I was working in the nightclubs. I was working in a little nightclub called Limelight.
Right. That's hardly a little nightclub.
Yeah, I just had dinner there the other day. I'm having a dinner party. There's a restaurant in the building now, and I'm friends with the promoter that owns it.
Right. Isn't that the converted church?
It's a deconsecrated church, yes.
Right. And that's it's been in tons of movies, and it was huge. And you're talking like the early '90s, right?
94 was when I first stepped foot in the building.
Okay. And
changed my life. That building is my soul is attached to that building.
I gotta go in that building. I've heard about it. And I've gone to New York many a time, and I just never came by.
Well, you can go have a nice restaurant dinner there.
Yeah.
And let me get the information for the restaurant before the end of the show.
Okay.
Because it's an Asian fusion restaurant, really good food, and you get to sit in the old club rooms at Limelight.
Right. So they don't do the clubs anymore. They just
No.
just restaurant. No.
Oh no, it closed as a club in 2007.
Right.
As far as I can recall, it was owned by Avalon by that time, the Avalon here in Hollywood.
Right.
And I was working there, living in the building.
Okay.
My experience with that building lasted about 13 years.
Okay.
And I'm still, like when I go there, I tell stories. Like I walk into the restaurant and I'll be like, "Yep, I used to work here. This used to be where all the flyers were delivered in the afternoon," and all the things that happened in Disco Bloodbath and Party Monster were very true, but not in the same way.
Oh, okay. So you were really in the club kid, like in that.
I didn't do drugs or drink, so.
Well, and you still don't.
Mhm.
But
I did for a while, and
okay.
That wasn't fun.
But you were in the midst of that whole the whole Hardy Monster, all the club kids.
Yes, I sat right next to Michael Alec.
Yeah.
In the office when I was doing my guest list. I was a promoter at Limelight for several years.
Oh, okay. And were your nights similar or, at that time?
Well, let's talk about what the vampire is. Unless you.
Oh, please. No. I loved it. I was getting to that.
Do you want to start that now? I mean, you have your schedule.
I have no schedule.
Okay.
I follow the conversation where it goes.
So, vampires.
Yes.
What they represent. There's a new modern mythology.
Okay.
That exists. That's very diverse, and it can transform into anything from an alien, like in the movie Light Force.
Okay.
To a cursed vampire like Dracula.
Mm-hmm.
To an atheist vampire like Lestat.
Okay.
What makes the vampire special, it's the monster that you can become and is angelic in our current perspective. But vampires have not always been like that. Vampires were in every single human culture. The vampire mythology has existed in one form or another, from the Chinese hopping vampires who throw rice at them where they have to pick it up, to the incubi and succubi of ancient Sumeria.
Right.
One of the things is there's kind of a vampire myth in ancient Egypt, but that is truly an Anne Rice invention.
Okay.
The mythology of the modern vampire began in Serbia and went to Istra, Croatia. Then it really didn't come to Romania in the way that we know it today, in the mass market way, until Dracula was published.
Right.
But in Mary Shelley and a guy named Polidori wrote in the 1820s Frankenstein, and there was another story of a ghost storytelling thing, and from that came Frankenstein,
right.
Prometheus.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think her brother published it under Lord Byron, which was not very popular with Lord Byron at the time.
I'd imagine, yeah.
And his name was Polidori, and he wrote a short story called The Vampire with a Y.
Right.
And then you had throughout in Paris in the 1830s, 40s, you had 4 vampire theaters.
Okay. The Grand Guignol?
No, that came later.
Okay.
Then in the 1860s, 70s, and 80s, you had Varney the Vampire and Carmilla.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm not familiar with them.
Those are penny dreadfuls.
Okay.
Okay. And you know what a penny dreadful
I
is?
know what a penny dreadful is.
So for the audience, what can you say what a penny dreadful is?
Penny dreadful are little horror books that they had sold at that time. Is that correct?
Yes.
Kind of the comic book of its era.
Yeah, but with no graphics. Like
Right.
maybe a one on the cover or something like that. But it was mainly
Right.
text.
Yeah, but a smaller book that had a story in it.
Maybe 20 pages.
Yeah.
There's a wonderful TV show called Penny Dreadful,
Yes.
which lasted 3 short seasons. However, a lot of the characters that you have, like Dracula or Dorian Gray or Frankenstein, those are the Penny Dreadful genre.
Right.
Okay. Then Dracula came out as a response to Slavic. Dracula was representing the reason why Bram Stoker connected Dracula, the character in Romania, to his vampire was because of a large immigration of Slavic people that were considered a plague.
All right.
So in his story, he's cursed by God, and the whole romanticism of the story actually is only in Bram Stoker's Dracula the movie.
Right.
But the dominant submissive predator-prey mentality is what really is the the crux of the modern vampire mythology.
Right. So it's an elegy about immigration, really.
Well, that's just one example of what the vampire can do as a mythology.
Right.
Okay. You can look at it as a dominant submissive thing. You can say the vampire energy came from alien worlds and came down and turned this person into a vampire, or it can be a religious.
Right.
Then the movie genre started, and vampire movies took off in the 1900s. In 1922, Nosferatu, and I did an event in a theater where that premiered in Paris. We did a vampire ball and played Nosferatu in the theater where Cabinet of Dr. Caligari was at. The only theater was called the Delphi Cineblast. It was the only cinema that actually survived bombing in World War II in the East, and they called it Klein Hollywood.
And how was that? Did you feel the vibe in the room? Or?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a cool theater, but the problem is you can't turn the music too loud, so as a nightclub experience, it was very limited.
Okay.
Since I don't live in Europe anymore, I live in Los Angeles. My experience with being able to have the resources to do European events is limited. So only this year we're doing Germany, Paris, and Dublin. That's it. Just 3 cities.
That sounds like fun.
Yeah, they're fun. Endless Night's a great experience.
I can attest to that, but Dublin seems a little off the beaten track.
Bram Stoker, my friend.
That's right. Now
Mad Irishman.
That's right. And so that brings us up. So, and that was one of the first questions I want to ask you, and I think I did ask you last time, was the difference between vampire with an I and vampire with a Y.
Well, that's been blurred in the last couple of years. Let's go through the vampire history a little bit.
Okay.
All right. So then, in the vampire history, you had the movie genre, you had the Hammer horror movies.
Right.
Occasionally, you have these people that claim they drink blood and they were vampires. Then in the 70s, there was a Luciferian satanic vampire coven in Paris. That was the first group of people that identified as vampires in a lifestyle or religion or in a cult practice.
Right.
They died out. That thing lasted like 2 or 3 years. I met the guy that ran it. He had a big beard and kept chewing gum. That's all I remember.
Wow.
He didn't speak English and smoked a lot of weed, so I didn't really get to talk to him much.
I guess that's how you survive.
He was a big burly guy, really cool. Actually, a very nice guy. Then what changed the game for the modern vampire is every 25 years something happens.
Right.
Okay. The vampire genre, the vampire mythology that we know, started with Polidori and evolved into Varney the Vampire, then Carmilla, then Dracula, then Nosferatu, then Christopher Lee. In the 50s, it kind of took a break, and then in the 60s, Hammer horror, with all those amazing movies.
Right.
And then Roman Polanski, The Bald Vampire.
Sure.
He was my neighbor in Paris, actually.
Polanski?
Yeah.
Yeah, you ever run into him?
Yeah, sure. I was kind of shy, though.